Mr. Barger, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. We're still in the morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your patience. And I would agree with Mr. Voorhees, I think, on one thing, that in terms of the length of a trial that we're anticipating here, this is going to be a rather short trial, that many cases that we get involved in would last quite a bit longer than this one. I think part of the brevity is associated to our virtual forum, but also the facts of the case are rather simple. Mr. Voorhees, for the purposes of providing context, has told you what evidence you're going to hear about how the accident happened, and specifically the location of the accident and some witnesses. And I'm going to share some photographs of you because I want to make sure that you guys have as many possible ways of seeing this accident here. And what I'm showing you is a photograph of the vehicle that Mr. James was traveling in at the time of the accident. And as Mr. Voorhees indicated to you, he was here here in Portland anyway, as a person who was looking for a job at the time. And this is the physical damage to the vehicle that he was operating when he ran that red light and was struck by Miss Harmon's vehicle. And these two photographs, not the greatest photographs, but they do show the damage. Now, as important to tell you what the evidence is going to be, it's also important to tell you what the evidence won't be. While the plaintiff will spend a lot of time on the individuals who witnessed the accident and suggesting that my client was inattentive, which he was, that he wasn't paying attention and he ran a red light. He actually ran 2 red lights, and he caused this accident at a high rate of speed. You won't hear from anybody as to what that means.
Mr. Barger, if I could pause for a moment.
Sure.
Do we have juror number 1? Are you able to hear and see? Okay, go ahead, Mr. Barger.
Thank you. You won't hear from anyone as to what that means. In other words, there are professionals out there, and Mr. Voorhees and I use them quite often in automobile accidents like this. They're called accident reconstructionists. They're also called biomechanical engineers. And these professional engineers can come in and they can take photographs like I just showed you, and they can tell you how much force is exerted inside that vehicle and on occupants of that vehicle to give you an idea about the forces involved in the collision itself. Now, there are no witnesses like that in this particular instance, so there's nothing that you can glean other than this is a intersection accident caused by my client with damage that looks like this to Miss Harmon's vehicle and to Mr. James' vehicle. But there's nothing else to help you with that. This case is about the medicine. This case isn't about the accident. It's about the medicine. And where does it start with the medicine? It actually doesn't start after this accident. It starts before this accident. And I'll explain that to you in a moment. But in order to keep linear in the terms of the conversation I'm attempting to have, I'm going to show you again what was marked as Exhibit 16 to, will be Exhibit 16 to the plaintiff's case. And it was part of the PowerPoint presentation that you just saw. This is it's a little bit zoomed in to help you see the months. Now, there's an error in this exhibit, number 1. This X that I'm circling around right here, this is actually the date of the accident and not a date of treatment by Miss Harmon. She actually does not go to an emergency room or urgent care or a chiropractor or her primary care physician on the date of the accident. So this is actually probably a mistake. The first time that she goes to seek any medical treatment after this accident is about a day and a half after the collision on Friday the 7th. And she goes to see Dr. Lindemann who is her essentially her primary care physician, because that's who she's been seeing, and that's who she saw his clinic anyway, the Portland clinic, prior in the 2 prior accidents, and we'll talk about this in a moment. Now, Dr. Linneman is important, and you're going to see some of his medical records, and what you'll see and what you'll hear from witnesses who've read the entire record is that Dr. Linneman diagnosed Miss Harmon with a cervical sprain, and some potential other injuries, which apparently she's not making claims for anymore. And he says, I think you should go to physical therapy, which is something that has worked for her apparently in the past, at least according to him. And he sends her to a course of physical therapy that is supposed to last for approximately 6 weeks and a couple of visits per week. Now, it takes Miss Harmon a little while, as anyone can understand, to get set up with a physical therapy. And she first goes to physical therapy on April 18th, which is a Tuesday. And she goes through that therapy. And one of the things that Dr. Lindeman indicated to Miss Harmon to do after she actually sees him on the first time on the 7th is to check back in with him in 2 weeks so he can find out how she's doing. Make sure, obviously, that she's set up with physical therapy. So she goes to the physical therapy visit on the 18th, and then she goes back to Dr. Lindeman on the 28th of April. And at that visit, she sees Dr. Lindeman. He's aware that she's in physical therapy. He's continuing the physical therapy. And again, he says to come back in 2 weeks for a recheck. Now, factually, we know what happens after that, and that is that despite Dr. Lindeman telling Miss Harmon on April 28th, 2017 to come back in 2 weeks, which presumably would have been around May 12th, 2017, we know that Miss Harmon does not return to Dr. Lindeman for a very, very long time. She actually does not return to Dr. Lindeman until January of 2020, in excess of 2.5 years after she was told to come back and check in with him in 2 weeks. Now, she does go to one more physical therapy visit on the 1st of May, the next business day after seeing Dr. Lindeman at the same time. And that was supposed to be her second PT visit out of a 6-week course that is, I believe, as many as 6 to 8 visits that she was being prescribed. Now, factually, what we know is that she doesn't go to any more treatment in May of 2017. And we're talking just less than a month after the accident. She has gone to 2 physical therapy visits, 2 doctor's visits, and the doctor is telling her to do these things and come back, and she stops coming back. She stops going anywhere. Now, I heard Mr. Voorhees indicate that the reason why she stopped going to physical therapy, and this is going to be evidence in the case, is because that she was unhappy with her care because she was being treated by a physical therapy student. Actually, ladies and gentlemen, the evidence from Miss Harmon's own mouth, her own sworn testimony, is that she stopped going to physical therapy in the first day of May of 2017 because she felt like she was getting better care at a chiropractor. But she hadn't had any care at a chiropractor before she stops treating with a physical therapist. It's not for a whole nother month after her last treatment with a physical therapist that she actually goes to the chiropractor. And ladies and gentlemen, she didn't get there from some referral from Dr. Lindeman, like he had referred her to physical therapy. She didn't get there from some type of referral from a physical therapist. She didn't get there from some type of referral from anybody. She happened to be driving by Dr. Bowles' clinic, and she sees it, and she goes to check it out and to see if she might like to do it. And she apparently walked in unannounced and liked what she saw, and she became a patient of Dr. Bowles. Now, ladies and gentlemen, she doesn't go to anyone after that until January of 2020. Her treatment now solely focused on over 90 visits with Dr. Bowles over the remainder of 2017 and 2018 up until the last 3 months of 2018. Now, in 2018, she seeks treatment through essentially September, and she stops seeking any treatment at that point in time. She seeks no treatment in the last 3 months of 2018. She seeks no treatment in all of 2019. She seeks one treatment in January of 2020 with Dr. Lindemann. And she has a forensic evaluation. And ladies and gentlemen, that is important. A forensic evaluation done by Dr. Rousseau on June 30th, 2020. The fact of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen, since September of 2018, Ms. Harmon has only sought one medical treatment that she even claims to be related to this motor vehicle accident in the last nearly 2 years. Now, it's not just important to understand the timing of her treatments, it's actually important to understand the context of her treatments. On more than one occasion, as Mr. Voorhees has indicated in this, I don't think he indicated in his opening, but he indicated that there were tests that people had indicated might be a good idea for Ms. Harmon to do to rule out various possible things that were going on with her. She never, ever does that. Dr. Lindemann was suggesting in January of 2020 that she undergo what's called an MRI, and Mr. Voorhees told you what that was in his opening statement. Dr. Rousseau suggested that she go through a MRI when he evaluated her in June of 2020, and also these ENG studies. She has never done that. Now, one of her doctors, her treating doctor, has been suggesting that she do that for 15 months now. And Dr. Rousseau has been suggested that in his one time a meeting with her back in June, so now 9 months ago. And yet we're here with Mr. Voorhees telling us that these things may rule in or rule out issues, and they're here to seek $250,000 from my client when they can't even tell you what her injury is in fact. Well, that's why, as Mr. Voorhees indicated, we have to hire people on our side of the case in order to get an evaluation of the claimant. I think it's very important. It'll come out in testimony that when Dr. Leonard and Dr. Mangum were retained, they were given a letter with a number of questions on it and a packet of material saying, I need you to evaluate Ms. Harmon's case. Please answer these questions. And they wrote a report. Both of them will testify to that fact. What you're going to hear from Dr. Rousseau is that Dr. Rousseau was similarly asked to render an opinion based on a packet of medical records. But the reality of it is that Dr. Rousseau was given a narrative document from Mr. Voorhees, which you will hear about when Dr. Rousseau testifies, where Mr. Voorhees gave his opinion about what was going on with the plaintiff and what injuries she might have, and then asked him a number of questions. Instead of just giving him a blank slate and letting him make his decision as to what was going on, Mr. Voorhees told the doctor what he thought was going on and then asked specific questions. And what's interesting about that, ladies and gentlemen, is the evidence is going to be that despite asking Dr. Rousseau a series of questions, some 8 questions about the various things that he thought were going on with Ms. Harmon, the doctor apparently wrote a draft report because he had it watermarked as draft. The evidence is going to be then that it was a final report, and many of the questions that were asked by Mr. Voorhees in his opening letter went unanswered by Dr. Rousseau. Now, what the defense did was to provide everything that they could possibly find and were given in the discovery phase of this case to Dr. Mangum and to Dr. Leonard. Dr. Mangum and Dr. Leonard focused in on the neck because that was the major complaint by Ms. Harmon, and also these numbing, tingling, radicular complaints that Miss Harmon was complaining of in her arms. What's of interest is, and you'll likely see this marked as an exhibit, is there is a chart note from a period of time in January of 2016, which predates this motor vehicle accident, where Miss Harmon goes in and sees the Portland Clinic. And at the Portland Clinic, which is Dr. Lindemann's clinic, and she is prescribed physical therapy, and she goes to physical therapy during that period of time. She goes in on January, I believe, 5th, and I could be, or I think it's the 5th of January, 2015. And in that statement that she gives to the doctors at that point in time, or the physical therapist at that period of time, and I'm looking for it myself so I can read it to you because you'll be able to see it in this trial. It's January 5th, 2016. Temporarily, Miss Harmon is seeking treatment for a motor vehicle accident that she had in November of 2015. And she goes in and she tells the physical therapist, Tyler Weiss, that she's complaining of bilateral upper arm or upper extremity numbness that has persisted since another motor vehicle accident sustained in June of 2015. So, ladies and gentlemen, what she's telling her doctor at that point, or her physical therapist at that period of time in January of 2016, is that in the June 2015 accident, she started experiencing this numbness and tingling in her upper arms. And that had been going on since that prior accident, and that it hadn't gotten any better. In fact, later she reports to the physical therapist that her numbness and tingling, she associates it to quilting, that her hands fall asleep every night, and this started at the first accident and is getting worse. Now, Ms. Harmon doesn't remember to tell anyone this after the accident that happened in April of 2017. She tells no one about it. In fact, when she sees Dr. Bowles after this accident, she says the opposite, that I've never had any of these problems before. What's interesting is Dr. Rousseau, when he reviews these records, and it's clear that he has reviewed these records because he actually puts a note down in his report taking account of the January 5th, 2016 physical therapy visit, but he writes nothing about the specifics of that visit and nothing about the complaints of that visit. He does not recognize that apparently Ms. Harmon has had numbness and tingling for a better part of 6 or 7 months at that point in time, that she associates to certain activities, that it's getting worse, and that it causes her hands to fall asleep. Instead, Dr. Rousseau simply writes that she went to a physical therapy visit, and in other parts of his report indicates that she's never reported any prior problems with these upper extremity issues to him before, and there doesn't appear to be any evidence of it. There's a long history of it, ladies and gentlemen, and what happened in April of 2017 didn't change what was going on. Dr. Leonard and Dr. Mangum have seen those records, and they believe they are extremely important. First, because it shows that she had these symptoms before this accident. Second, because she had them for a long period of time. Third, they are the same types of symptoms that she's complaining of after the motor vehicle accident. Fourth, that she does not recognize that she had those problems before. Fifth, that no one knows exactly what's going on with them, but as you'll see from Dr. Rousseau, he thinks that it might be a peripheral nerve issue or an ulnar nerve issue. And Dr. Leonard specifically, who's a neurologist, ladies and gentlemen, and the only neurologist that's going to testify in this case, is going to say, this looks like, to me, carpal tunnel syndrome. And what he knows about Miss Harmon is her long history of piano playing. As Mr. Voorhees said, we're going to hear testimony and evidence that Miss Harmon has played the piano ever since she was a toddler and that she has made it her life's work. And furthermore, that this type of complaint that she's having in both arms is ultimately more like carpal tunnel than anything else and isn't caused by a traumatic injury, because if she had a traumatic injury as a result of the accident, then she would have been complaining about forearm pain or elbow pain, where she actually had a striking injury to those areas of her arms as opposed to anything else. And she didn't. The last couple of things I'm going to show you, and I know that we got into this a little bit in Mr. Voorhees' opening statement. This, I think, is a little bit clearer of a picture. This is what your neck looks like if you're looking straight on. And you can tell because these are the collarbones right here that we normally see, these white bones right here. And we think of those. This was what Mr. Voorhees was trying to demonstrate with his anatomical model, is that our vertebrae sit on top of each other, all the way up to C2 and all the way down to C7. And these little gray things are what we call discs. These yellow things coming out from what these are called foramen, or simply just holes, are the nerves. Now, if, in fact, there was a neck nerve injury that Miss Harmon had as a result of this accident, there would be an impingement of one of these nerves. And what's interesting, ladies and gentlemen, is it isn't just any old nerve. That causes pain. There's actually a map of the body. And when I showed you the section earlier, each one of those nerve roots is labeled. We'll have the C3 nerve, which comes out from underneath the third cervical vertebrae. The C4 comes out from underneath the fourth cervical vertebrae. And depending on which nerve is impinged, you can tell where the symptoms are going to be. Now, what's interesting about Miss Harmon's symptoms, and Dr. Leonard and Dr. Mangum will probably make this more clear to you, is that she complains about bilateral, i.e. on both hands, which would suggest then that she would have to have an impinged nerve on both sides of her neck. In addition, her complaints range from the outer two fingers to the two forefingers, to her thumb and the forefinger, to her thumb, the forefinger, and the middle finger, and they move all around. And if that's the case, if these pain symptoms are coming from her neck, and because there's 3 different nerves that have to innervate a hand, then ultimately we would have to see impingement on not only both sides of her neck, but on multiple levels of her cervical spine, which is very unlikely to have happened from a motor vehicle accident without excruciating pain immediately following the accident. What's more likely, and this is Dr. Leonard's opinion, is more likely true than not, is that in fact, all of these pains that she's feeling have absolutely nothing to do with a neck injury. They have everything to do with overuse injuries in her elbow and her wrist that have to do with her activities of daily life that existed before this accident, and in fact, that she was having symptoms from before this accident. At the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, this case is going to boil down to 2 different decisions. And that is was this a soft tissue injury that caused a neck strain to Ms. Harmon over a short period of time with a reasonable amount of treatment, or was she in fact injured in some way that she claims is more of a nerve injury without any real evidence to support it? The defense is going to indicate to you that the evidence more likely than not supports a neck injury that she sought 4 treatments of in the first month, and ultimately only about 8 treatments in the second and third month. And that after that, Miss Harmon's symptoms really reverted to those that she was experiencing prior to this automobile accident, much like she had been experiencing for the year or so prior to this motor vehicle accident, as she described to her own physical therapist in January of 2016, and have much more to do with her activities of daily life than anything to do with this motor vehicle accident. Thank you for your time.